All right, let's talk about the Supreme Court, which begins a new term today. And there are a number of high-profile cases to be decided. That includes a case over Colorado's ban on so-called conversion therapy for minors, Louisiana's use of race in redistricting, and the president's ability to impose tariffs. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. Jan, good to see you, my friend, as always. So this is expected to be a very, very big term for the justices. We've already heard this morning that they've rejected even hearing one case, the case of Ghislaine Maxwell. But what are we expecting over the course of the next few months?
Well, good morning, Vlad, and happy first Monday of October when the justices obviously kick off their upcoming session that'll run through the end of June. And you've already mentioned a few of the big cases the court's got on their docket already, but this has the potential, I think, to be one of the most historic terms that the court's had in a long time. And why is that? Well, you mentioned one of the Trump cases. They're going to decide the Trump tariffs, but they've got another one, whether or not he can fire members of independent federal agencies, including potentially the Federal Reserve Board. And then there's still other Trump cases on the horizon I think they're going to have to take up over the next few months. Birthright citizenship is a big one. The Trump administration has asked the court to weigh in on whether or not Donald Trump can kind of rewrite our long-held understandings that if you're born in this country, you're a citizen. And, you know, that's not all. I mean, if that were not big enough, Vlad, just the Trump cases, this is also a term where they have almost every single hot-button social issue that divides Americans that you can possibly imagine. You mentioned they've got a case tomorrow on so-called conversion therapy, Colorado's efforts to restrict therapists from discussing gender and sexual identity questions. There's a big transgender rights case that looks at whether or not transgender athletes can play girls' sports. We've got a gun rights case. We've got a campaign finance reform case, and on and on. They're going to keep adding cases as the term progresses, which I said goes to the end of June. Of course, you mentioned one case they won't take up involves Maxwell.
Yeah. And Jan, so does it seem to you, as somebody who's covered the Supreme Court for all these years, that there's a sense that, because as children and, you know, as we go through the school system in this country, we learn about the co-equal branches of government. We understand, at least we are taught, that the founding fathers did not want power concentrated in any one branch of government. And that is why we have that system of checks and balances. But in your experience over the last couple of years, is it your understanding that the court is perhaps more inclined to give the executive branch way more authority and power, perhaps as they read the Constitution and understand it, than perhaps intended by the framers, or at least the way that we were taught about it, that the power of the presidency seems to be growing with each passing year?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And obviously, it's going to be really relevant this term with all the Trump cases where they've kind of set up this real test of the president's power. But this is a Supreme Court that for years has had a pretty robust view of a president's power, which, of course, President Biden certainly appreciated when he was in the White House. I think there's a bunch of reasons for why we see this Supreme Court kind of allowing a broader view of executive power, or certainly thinking that's more consistent with the way the framers saw it. You've got to think about the role of Congress. And as Congress has grown increasingly dysfunctional, you see presidents kind of trying to move into some of that space. President Biden certainly did that. So did President Obama. Now you have Donald Trump coming in and saying he's going to go within and kind of push the limits of what the Constitution also grants the president himself. And the court so far this summer, Vlad, as you saw, they've kind of allowed some of these policies to take effect for now while lower courts review the merits. But all of those cases are heading straight to the Supreme Court, where they're eventually going to have to confront the merits. But right now, they're kind of letting those take effect, but just in the short term. So I think that's why there's been some confusion over the summer. People are kind of realizing that these are these interim orders. But once we get kind of to the bottom line of what the merits are, Trump is not going to win all of those cases, Vlad.
Yeah, and you're right to point out that presidents in years past have enjoyed some of that authority being granted by the Supreme Court's interpretation of the president's authority. The other question I have for you, Jan, before I let you go, is you mentioned that birthright citizenship case. Now, as I understand it, this is sort of a narrow case where the president is arguing that the children of people who are here illegally should not be granted birthright citizenship. But as you understand precedent, could this at some point, if the court reinterprets the 14th Amendment, could that leave all of us open, perhaps, to the claim that those of us born here in this country, even if our parents, because you understand, as most people do, that, for example, my parents came here in 1963. Immigration laws were very, very different back in the early 60s. And so I don't even know what they were. I don't know what the status of my parents was when they got here. I know that they were students, but I wonder if that could leave other people open to an interpretation of this 14th Amendment that could leave other groups vulnerable.
Well, Vlad, I mean, you've identified exactly why this case would wreak enormous havoc on our entire system and upend our long-held understanding of what it means to be a citizen in this country, which was obviously built on immigration. And that's why I think there is absolutely zero chance that the court is going to go along with Trump's efforts here to undo that with that executive order. I think that, you know, maybe there'll be one justice, but it takes five, and there's no chance. So I think we can kind of wait and see, but it's highly unlikely, Vlad.
All right, Jan Crawford, always love having you on. Come back again, Jan. I don't see you enough on our show. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you. Always happy to be here.
Love it. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it.